If I spend every waking moment trying to just beat you, that can't be what motivates me. Again, I want to beat you. I've learned that you need to trust somebody when you have tough decisions or when you're in difficult situations, that you don't know it all, and that unfailing love and unconditional support are amazing things. I didn't know growing up how great it would be to have your best friends be your dog. I have never been very comfortable ranking players. That may sound strange coming from a coach who spent most of his life in a game where everything is measured. Wins, losses, championships, numbers on a scoreboard. But after enough years, you stop remembering basketball that way. You remember the people. You remember the player who made you change a game plan the night before, the one whose teammates seemed calmer when he touched the ball, the one who could walk into the hardest moment of a season and somehow make everyone around him believe. I was fortunate enough to coach some extraordinary players, compete against many others, and watch a few who changed college basketball before I ever had the chance to stand across from them. So if you ask me now to name the 6 finest college players I ever saw, studied, coached, or measured my teams against, I can finally give you an answer. And number 1 is not simply the man with the best resume. He is the player who changed the way I understood the game. Number 6 is Patrick Ewing, Georgetown. When I first started paying real attention to Patrick, it was not the block shots that stayed with me. Everybody could see those. What interested me was what happened before the shot ever went up. Guys would turn the corner, see him waiting, and change their minds. As a coach, you notice things like that. A great defender can stop a play. Patrick could stop the idea of a play. That Georgetown team had an edge to it. John Thompson gave him discipline and toughness, but Patrick gave the whole thing a center. You knew where he was. Your players knew where he was. And after a while, that awareness started affecting decisions. That was what made him special to me. Then came the summer of 1984. Patrick had just finished helping Georgetown win the national championship, and I had the opportunity to be around him with the United States Olympic team. I had already seen what he could do in college. Being around him gave me a different appreciation for it. There were outstanding players in that environment, guys with confidence, guys who were used to getting wherever they wanted on a basketball court. Patrick still changed the geography of the floor. That is the best way I can explain it. When he was near, the basket space became smaller. Driving lanes that looked open suddenly did not feel open anymore. You could see players making decisions a little earlier. A pass might leave their hands sooner. A shot might go up higher than usual. Sometimes they simply went somewhere else. And Patrick did not need to celebrate any of it. That mattered to me. Young coaches sometimes fall in love with the obvious part of defense, the steal, the block, the possession that makes everybody stand up. Patrick taught me to pay closer attention to the possessions where nothing happened because the offense decided not to challenge him in the first place. Years later, that is still what I remember. People can look at his Georgetown career and see the championship, the Final Fours, all the things that belong in the record book. I see a young man who showed me that defense could be a form of leadership. You could give your teammates confidence simply by being where you were supposed to be every time. Putting Patrick at number 6 does not make him smaller in my memory. It tells you something about the 5 men still ahead. And the next one controlled the basketball game in almost the opposite way. Patrick closed space. Magic Johnson seemed to create it. Number 5 is Magic Johnson, Michigan State. The first thing I remember about Magic was not his size. It was the reaction of the other 4 players when the ball came into his hands. They moved differently. That may sound like a small thing, but coaches notice it. When certain players get the ball, everybody else begins watching. When Magic got it, everybody else seemed to start playing. There is a difference. He understood where people needed to be, and more importantly, he made them believe they belonged there. That was his gift. Leadership is a word we use too easily in sports. With Magic, you could actually see it happening. The game I always come back to is the national championship in 1979. Michigan State against Indiana State. Everybody remembers what that game became afterward. Magic and Larry, two different personalities, two different kinds of basketball, a game that people still talk about all these years later. But when I watched Magic, I saw something a little different. There was pressure everywhere that night. Every possession felt larger because everyone understood what was at stake. A young player can react to that kind of pressure by trying to do more. He takes another shot, holds the ball another second, tries to prove that he is the reason his team is there. Magic never seemed trapped by that. He kept playing the game. If a teammate was open, the ball went there. If the pace needed to change, he changed it. He did not seem interested in making every important play himself. He seemed interested in making sure Michigan State made the right play. I learned to appreciate that more as I got older. When you are a young coach, talent catches your eye first. Later, you begin watching what a player does to the confidence of the people around him. Magic gave people confidence. That is harder to measure than points or assists, but I would argue it is one of the rarest abilities in basketball. I coached a lot of leaders in my life. Some led with their voice, some led with toughness, some simply showed up every day and made the standard clear. Magic had another way. He made the game feel possible for everybody standing beside him. That is why I have him here. And whenever I think about that night in 1979, it is almost impossible to remember Magic without seeing the man waiting on the other side. Larry Bird did not make the game feel easier. He made it feel like he already knew what was going to happen. Number 4 is Larry Bird, Indiana State. Larry was one of those players who could fool you if you watched him for only a few minutes. He did not move like the fastest man on the floor. He was not trying to impress you with how high he could jump. Nothing about him seemed hurried. And then you started watching where he was before everybody else got there. That was the thing. Larry saw the game early. As a coach, I learned that there are players who react to basketball, and there are players who seem to live one possession ahead of it. Larry belonged to that second group. He would make a pass into a space that did not look open yet. He would move toward a rebound before the shot had fully left somebody's hand. A defender would shift his weight for half a second, and Larry had already understood what that meant. I remember watching Indiana State during that run in 1979 and thinking about how difficult he must have been to prepare for. Then came the championship game against Michigan State. The easy way to remember that night is Magic against Bird. That is what history turned it into. But coaches look at games differently. Michigan State understood where the danger was. They were not going to let Larry become comfortable. They crowded him. They made him work for touches. They tried to make every catch feel like a decision instead of an opportunity. And what stayed with me was that Larry never seemed to panic. He kept reading. If the defense came toward him, he looked for what it had left behind. If somebody overplayed a passing lane, he found another angle. He rebounded, he moved the ball, he kept trying to solve the game instead of forcing the game to surrender to him. That matters. There are nights when your best player will not get what he wants. Every great team eventually puts you in that position. And when that happens, you find out whether a player understands basketball or whether he only understands his own game. Larry understood basketball. I appreciated that more and more as I coached longer. When I was younger, I probably thought athleticism meant speed, strength, jumping ability. Larry helped broaden that definition for me. The mind has a speed of its own. A player who sees something a second earlier does not have to be the fastest man. He is already there. People remember the shooting. They remember the rivalry. They remember the name Larry Bird becoming part of basketball history. What I remember is how rarely he seemed surprised by the game. And that is a remarkable quality. But the next man on this list presented a completely different problem. With Larry, you worried that he knew what was coming before you did. With Lew Alcindor, you usually knew exactly what was coming. You just had no idea how to stop it. Number 3 is Lew Alcindor, UCLA. I was a young man when Lew was changing college basketball. I was not standing on the opposite sideline drawing up a defense for him. I was watching, learning, trying to understand what a player like that did to a game. And what struck me was how little mystery there was. Everybody knew where UCLA wanted to go. Everybody knew who the ball eventually had to find. That did not make stopping him any easier. There are players who beat you because they surprise you. Lew did something more unsettling. He made you prepare for exactly what was coming and then made your preparation look incomplete. That is a different kind of dominance. You could bring another defender. You could try to deny the entry pass. You could force UCLA farther from the basket. Coaches could spend days building a plan around taking one thing away. Then the ball would get to him in the right place, and the geometry of the game changed again. That stayed with me. When you are young in coaching, you have a tendency to believe every problem has a tactical answer. If we defend this way, rotate here, pressure there, maybe we can control it. Basketball humbles you eventually. Lew was one of the first players who made that lesson obvious to me. Sometimes the opponent has someone so gifted, so composed, and so physically suited to what he is doing that your job is not to eliminate him. Your job is to survive him without allowing everything else to collapse. That UCLA era felt that way. The remarkable part was not simply that Lew scored. It was the pressure his presence put on every other defensive decision. Help too early, and somebody else was free. Stay home, and you risked leaving one defender with a problem he was never built to solve. That is how one player changes a team without touching the ball every second. Years later, when I had teams of my own and we faced great interior players, I understood that lesson much better. A great center does not only occupy the paint, he occupies your preparation. He is there when you build the scouting report. He is there when you decide your rotations. He is there in the mind of a guard who is thinking about driving the lane before the game has even started. Lew Alcindor had that kind of weight. People can debate eras and styles forever. I never found much value in that. What I know is that when I watched him, I saw a player who forced college basketball to respond to him. That is rare. And if this list were only about pure dominance, he might be even higher. But the next two men are different for me. Lew was someone I watched and learned from. Laettner was someone I had to understand every single day. Number two is Laettner Duke. Christian is different from the other names I have talked about because I did not have to study him from a distance. I lived with him. And I mean that in the coaching sense. I saw the good days. I saw the practices when he was difficult. I saw the moments when his competitiveness made everybody around him better, and I saw the moments when that same competitiveness made him hard to deal with. Christian was not easy. I have never thought that was a bad thing. What separated him was that when the responsibility became heavier, he moved toward it. Some players want the ball when everything is going well. Christian wanted it when the season was about to end. That is a very different kind of confidence. The game everybody remembers is Kentucky in 1992. And, of course, I remember the shot. How could I not? We were at the end of overtime. There was almost nothing left. One possession stood between us and going home. When we came to the bench, there was no magic speech. At that point, players do not need a speech. They need clarity. We knew what we wanted to do. Grant Hill would throw the ball the length of the court. Christian had to catch it, create something in a very small amount of time, and give us a chance. Think about what that asks of a young man. Everybody in the building knows the season is sitting on that possession. There is nowhere to hide. Christian never looked like he wanted to hide. Grant threw it. Christian caught it. He gave himself space, turned and shot. The ball went in. That is what everybody remembers. What I remember happened before the ball ever left Grant's hands. I remember trusting Christian. That trust did not come from one night. It came from years of seeing how he responded when things became uncomfortable. It came from practices where he refused to let standards slip. It came from arguments. It came from mistakes. It came from watching a young man slowly understand that being the person everybody depends on is not a privilege. It is a burden. Christian accepted the burden. That is why that shot never felt accidental to me. Dramatic, yes. Unbelievable, maybe. But accidental, no. He had been preparing himself for moments like that long before anybody knew there would be a Kentucky game. As I got older, I understood something else about coaching. You do not need every great player to be easy. You need him to be honest about what winning requires. Christian was honest about it. People remember the shot. I remember everything we went through that made me willing to put the season in his hands. That is why placing him number 2 is difficult. If this were only about what a college player accomplished under pressure, Christian could stand at the top of almost any list I made. But there is still one player ahead of him, and the difference is not that Michael Jordan wanted the moment more than Christian did. The difference is that Michael changed my understanding of how far competitive greatness could actually go. Number 1 is Michael Jordan, North Carolina. And I know what some people will say. Christian played for me. We went through championships together. I trusted him with seasons hanging in the balance. So how could I put somebody from North Carolina above him? I have thought about that. The answer is that Christian showed me how much responsibility a great player could carry. Michael showed me how far competitive greatness could go. I remember watching him when he was still young before the world had decided what Michael Jordan was going to become. You could already see something in him that was difficult to teach. Pressure did not make him smaller. It seemed to give him somewhere to go. The moment everybody knows came in, the national championship game in 1982, North Carolina was playing Georgetown. The game was tight. The season was sitting there, and Dean Smith trusted a freshman with a shot. Michael took it. He made it. People have replayed that moment so many times that it almost feels inevitable now. It was not inevitable then. That is what gets lost when history becomes familiar. He was a young player in the biggest game of his life, and when the ball came to him, he did not look like a young player hoping the moment would be kind to him. He looked ready to own whatever happened next. As a coach, that stays with you. But my understanding of Michael did not really become complete until much later. In 1992, I was fortunate enough to be an assistant with the United States Olympic team. By then, Michael was no longer the kid from North Carolina. He had become Michael Jordan. And being around him was different from watching him. You saw the work. You saw how personal competition was to him. A drill could matter. A scrimmage could matter. A small challenge that another great player might forget 5 minutes later could suddenly become important because Michael had decided it was important. That changed the temperature in the gym. The remarkable thing was that everybody there was already great. Magic was there. Larry was there. Patrick was there. These were men who had nothing to prove to anybody. Michael could still raise the level. That is where he separates himself from me. Patrick Ewing could change the floor defensively. Magic could give confidence to everyone around him. Larry Bird could see the game before it developed. Lew Alcindor could force an entire defense to organize itself around him. Christian Laettner could carry the weight of the last possession and ask for more. Michael had pieces of all those things, but there was something else. He made competition feel personal without making winning selfish. That is rare. He wanted to beat you, certainly, but the larger effect was that everyone around him had to decide whether they were willing to meet the standard he had brought into the room. I saw that as a coach, and it affected the way I thought about great players afterward. Talent matters. Skill matters. Big moments matter. But the very best player can change what everyone else believes is acceptable. That is why Michael is number 1 for me. Christian gave me some of the greatest moments of my coaching life. That will never change. Michael gave me a standard I carried into the rest of it. After all these years, when I think about the finest competitors I have ever been around, I still begin with him, Michael Jordan. When I look back at those 6 names now, I do not really see a ranking anymore. I see lessons. Patrick Ewing taught me that defense can control a game before the offense even begins. Magic Johnson showed me that leadership is not always about taking the biggest shot. Sometimes it is about making 4 other people believe they are ready to take it. Larry Bird reminded me that the mind can move faster than the body. Lew Alcindor showed me that there are moments when even the best plan in the world has limits. Christian Laettner taught me what trust looks like when a season comes down to 1 possession. And Michael Jordan showed me that the highest level of competition is not something you turn on when the lights get bright. You carry it with you every day. That is probably what I understand better now than I did when I was a younger coach. Basketball was never only about championships. I spent a long time chasing them, certainly. We all did. But the game gave me something more useful than trophies. It gave me people who challenged the way I thought, people who forced me to adjust, people who showed me things I could bring back to my own players. That is one of the great gifts of coaching. If you are paying attention, the other team is teaching you too. So I can put numbers beside these 6 men. I can say number 6 and work my way to number 1. But years from now, those numbers will matter less than the things they left behind. The scoreboard always reaches 0. What the game teaches you does not